3, 2, 1.
מי זה בעצם הבן אדם הזה?
מה יש לי להגיד עליו?
הוא חלוץ, הוא לוחם,
אוהב את המדינה הזאת.
הוא אחד האנשים שהכי השפיעו עליי.
התאהבתי באיש.
מצאתי בו פרטנר אמיתי.
הוא האדמו"ר שלי. תארו לכם, הוא ראש ממשלת ישראל.
פחד אלוהים.
הייתי יושב שבעה על מדינת ישראל.
סוף החלום הציוני.
אז מי אתה בעצם באמת?
נשמה גדולה.
שובר לבבות.
אינטלקטואל.
אל תטעו, הוא פוליטיקאי.
שמאלני.
רדיקלי.
אוהב ערבים.
מסוכן מאוד למדינה.
קומוניסט.
קומוניסט.
קומוניסט!
אי אפשר לא לאהוב אותו, אבל הוא פשוט טועה.
אבל אולי זה החן שבו.
100 חוקים ב10 שנים, אין דבר כזה.
החוקים שלו פשוט שינו את פני המדינה.
לראות אותו נלחם למען החלשים בכל מקום. הוא יודע שהאנשים האלה לעולם לא יעשו עבודה.
הוא לוחם צדק, הוא מהפכן.
הוא המתלבש הכי גרוע בכנסת.
יהיה טוב, מה אתה כל כך רציני?
פטריוט אמיתי, פמיניסט.
פנומן.
אוהב להט"בים.
אוהב אדם.
מענש אמיתי.
עזרה בדרך, עזרה בדרך שלך, עזרה בדרך, עזרה בדרך, עזרה בדרך שלך, עזרה בדרך, עזרה בדרך שלך, עזרה בדרך, עזרה בדרך.
אם היה לו כיפה, הוא היה בש"ס.
Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos, and I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York. Our guest today on the show is Dov Khenin, subject of the film Comrade Dov. He's an Israeli political scientist and lawyer, a lifelong activist in Israeli politics, and for the last 12 years, until his decision to not run in 2019, a member of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. He's a longtime member of the Communist Party of Israel, and perhaps most notably, was the only Jewish member of the Arab-Israeli party, Hadash, the Joint List, as it's called. It's the political alliance of the main Arab minority parties in Israel, making up the third largest faction in the parliament and receiving about 80% of the Arab vote. Dov has been one of the most prolific authors of legislation in the last 12 years in the Knesset, introducing and helping to pass dozens of bills designed to advance human rights, working class and social rights, environmental protection and health, women's rights, gender equality, LGBT rights, children's protection and animal rights, and wildlife safeguards. As you viewed on the trailer to the documentary, Comrade Dov is hard to categorize. He sounds like spiritual progressives, Cornel West, Reverend William Barber of the Poor People's Campaign, Rabbi Michael Lerner, Michelle Alexander, the Radical Imagination, and other advocates of revolutionary radical love, as he and other Hadash members march and proclaim, Jews and Arabs refuse to be enemies. He sounds like Kshama Sawant when he introduced and passed minimum wage legislation and says the problem of low wages is the most critical of all. Not the price of cottage cheese, and not even apartment prices. He sounds like climate activists Greta Thunberg and Naomi Klein, as he called for stricter environmental standards, supporting the campaign against the privatization of Israel's natural gas resources and introducing an environmental court for the country to watch over natural resources and safeguard wildlife and ecosystems. He sounds like human rights advocates Susanna Heschel, Rashid Khalidi, Rabbi Arthur Waskow, and Women Wage Peace in his long-standing and consistent denouncing of the occupation, clear support for Palestinian national rights, and as a vehement opponent of the war in Gaza. He also sounds like activist politicians Bernie Sanders, Tom Hayden, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, in aspiring to a socialism that means liberating politics from big capital, the rule of profit over everything in life, whether it's the economy, mass culture, relationships, education, health, and the environment. Or maybe they all sound like Dov. As he puts it, there has to be a clear alternative to the broken politics and bankrupt spirituality of not only the right, but also the so-called center and moderate parties. Democracy needs to expand in all walks of life in Israel, America, and around the world. The award-winning filmmaker Barak Hyman has created in Comrade Dov a thought-provoking and beautifully intimate portrait of a unique politician who refuses to give up as reality deals him one critical blow after another. He's created a historic masterpiece that examines the open wounds of contemporary Israeli society and, by extension, those resisting authoritarian fascism, militarism, greed, racism, racial intolerance in this country and around the world. Now, before we welcome Comrade Dov to the Radical Imagination, here's a short clip from the movie where Comrade Dov discusses the Arab Peace Initiative with Israeli students.
כן, כן. שתי המדינות הם חלק מהמצע המשותף של הרשימה.
היתרון הגדול ביותר שיש למדינה אחת, זה שאתה לא צריך לעשות כלום. אתה לא צריך להגיע להסכמים עם אף אחד, אתה לא צריך לעשות שום דבר. כל אדם בשטח שמהים עד הירדן, יהיו לו אותם זכויות, בדיוק, לחלוטין. ועל זה נעשה את כל המאבקים, וכל האנרגיות האלה שאנחנו מוציאים כבר כמעט 50 שנה על שתי מדינות, היינו יכולים אולי להביא כבר למשהו הרבה יותר טוב.
איך אתה תרגיע את אלה שחוששים לרוב הערבי?
אתה מוכן לוותר על מדינה יהודית?
אם אין לי ברירה, הייתי שמח אם לא הייתי מוותר, אבל אם אין לי ברירה, אז אני מוותר.
יש ניסיונות למדינות רב-לאומיות. הניסיונות האלה לא כל כך מצליחים. מדינת ישראל לא מצליחה להכיל בתוכה מיעוט לאומי ערבי של 20%. פחות מ-20%. לא מצליחה. מגיבה אליו בהיסטריה. לכן מי שינסה לשכנע אותי שהמדינות הדו-לאומיות לא עובדות בשום מקום, אבל דווקא אצלנו, עם הסכסוך העקוב מדם שיש אצלנו בין הישראלים והפלסטינים, דווקא אצלנו זה כן יעבוד, אני חושב שהוא חי בסרט. בבקשה.
כמו שאמרת עכשיו,
שמך.
נועם.
נועם.
כן.
מהיכן אתה?
מחולה. מעבר לקבל.
תראה, אני את ידיעת הארץ בכל זאת קצת מכיר.
יש כל מיני מדינות, כמו לבנון ואיראן, שיעשו איתנו מלחמה גם אם נעשה שלום עם לא יודע מי שאתה חושב שנעשה איתו שלום. מה יקרה כאילו אם נעשה שלום באמת עם מישהו, כאילו? איך זה יעזור לזה שלא תהיה מלחמה איתם?
שאלה מאוד מאוד טובה. תראה, מה שנמצא כרגע על השולחן, זו יוזמה מאוד מאוד מעניינת, שהיא כבר האמת בת יותר מ10 שנים, היא נקראת יוזמת השלום הערבית. ויוזמת השלום הערבית מדברת על זה, בעיקרון, שישראל תיסוג מהשטחים ותקבל שלום לא רק עם הפלסטינים, אלא עם כל מדינות ערב.
זה אומר רק שאנחנו צריכים לצאת מהשטחים? זהו, זה כל מה שמבקשים.
הבסיס זה יציאה מהשטחים, הקמת מדינה פלסטינית, ואני מצטט לך, פתרון צודק ומוסכם לבעיית הפליטים. מהו צודק ומוסכם? רק תגידי לי את שמך. אוקיי, אז בתשובה לשאלה של נחלה. הייתה מלחמה, אנשים או ברחו או גורשו, והם נמצאים היום במחנות פליטים. גם אם בן אדם בורח מהבית שלו כי יש מלחמה, זה לא אומר שזהו, כבר אין לו שום זכויות, ברחת, נגמר. הצד השני של המגרש הוא שבאותם מקומות שאותם אנשים ברחו מהם או גורשו מהם, חיים היום אנשים אחרים. אתה לא יכול לתקן עוול אחד על ידי יצירתו של עוול אחר. אם אתה באמת רוצה את ההסכם הזה, אז את כל הבעיות אפשר לפתור. את כל הבעיות אפשר לפתור. עם יצירתיות, עם דמיון ועם רצון טוב. אם אתה לא רוצה את ההסכם הזה, אפילו הבעיות הכי קטנות יכולות להתנפח למכשולים בלתי עבירים.
Creative imagination and goodwill. Dov, it is so great to have you on the Radical Imagination. Welcome. You're Skyping in from Israel. Thank you again for being here, and I can't wait to discuss so many things with you. So,
thank you
again,
for having me.
Welcome, 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 welcome. There were so many clips from the movie I wanted to show, so I thought we'd start with you discussing the crucial issue of peace between Palestinians and Israelis with the Israeli students. So why don't we begin by you telling our audience here a little bit what you were trying to accomplish there, and perhaps also bring in your own background and your own student days. How about that?
Well, actually, I've started my political, activity as a student in Tel Aviv University, actually in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem at the time, when I joined a joint Jewish-Arab leftist group that struggled together for Israeli-Palestinian peace, for justice for the Palestinian minority inside Israel. This was, my main political activity in the early 80s, late 70s. And actually it was an activity that was concentrated on one of the most crucial issues in Israeli reality, and that is the issue of relationship between Jews and Arabs, relationship between Israelis and Palestinians. For Israel, I think that the issue of achieving peace with our Arab neighbors is actually a matter of life and death. Israel is a small society. We live in a huge Arab and Muslim era. And therefore, for us to be able to live peacefully in this region, this is a matter of the most important self-interest for Israelis. And that is something I try to persuade Israeli public opinion. Israelis sometimes believe that we are the strong, so we should not hear the concerns of the Palestinians. We have the support of the United States of America, and therefore we can continue to do whatever Israeli government wants us to do. That is a very big mistake. National extremism brought many people in the past to national disaster. And if we want to avoid national disaster, we should understand that although at the moment Israel is strong, peace is essential for our future.
Now, Dov, your grandfather immigrated from Russia to Palestine, correct? When he was 12 years old. Correct? Basically, Jews made up what? About 6% of the population at that time? And they were very poor, right? They were ultra-Orthodox. Were they part of a Zionist movement that essentially originated in Eastern and Central European society that espoused the sort of nationalism that you're talking about here?
Well, actually, from one side of my family, my grandfather and grandmother came from the Soviet Union. They were very religious people. So they fought very bitterly against the Soviet authorities in the 30s to have them or to let them go to the Holy Land. It was for them the Holy Land. And they succeeded in persuading Soviet authorities to let them leave. And they came to what was called then Palestine in 1936. That is one side of my family. The second side of my family, the family of my mother, is very, very old in Palestine. Actually, I am the 8th generation. Also, this line of family is ultra-Orthodox. They were part of the Jewish minority in Hebron, and they lived there till they left for Jerusalem in the beginning of the 20s, in the beginning of the 20s of the 20th century. So they were not the typical Zionists. They were religious people, they were very much connected with the Holy Land, but they were not really part of the Zionist movement.
Political Zionism, but would you characterize them as religious Zionists in the sense going back to the religious roots of the Jewish people?
Well, you know, the word Zionism is very different for different people. So we should discuss what we mean, what we actually mean by using this term. For most Israelis, Zionism really means patriotism. So if you say that someone is anti-Zionist, then most Israelis will say, well, he hates his own people, or he hates his own country. That is the usual meaning, the daily meaning of what is Zionism to most Israeli Jews. To Arab Palestinians, Zionism is the political movement that was responsible for, the tragedy of Palestinian people. So Zionism is considered very, very differently among different people. So if you would like to relate to Zionism as some kind of relationship to this country or to this land, then both my grandfathers were Zionists in this sense.
Provocative question here. Last week's show, we had Rashid Khalidi on, Palestinian American scholar whose recent book looks at the 100-year war on Palestine, and from 1917 to 2017, the colonial settlement war on Palestine. Would you characterize this in any way as a colonial venture, State of Israel?
Well, I think it's much more complicated than that. I think that most Jews really came here not because they were colonialists or because they were sent by some colonial power to build a faraway colony, but because they ran away. You know, the Jews were the victims of a huge anti-Semitic movement, and the Jews were the victim of the Holocaust. So many Jews ran away from Europe at the beginning and later from Arab countries because they ran away from a country where they were not, they could not find their home anymore. So, and I think that when people run away from somewhere and try to continue to live, they have the complete right to emigrate and to find for themselves a better life elsewhere. I think that when someone is drawing in the sea, he has the complete right to climb upon a piece of wood that is on the sea, although perhaps this piece of wood belongs to someone else. So I do not have any problem with the issue of Jews coming to Palestine or escaping to Palestine from the horrors of the 20th century. The problem is in a different part of the story. Zionist movement actually said that Jews are coming to a country with no people, to an empty country. But this country was not empty. There were Palestinians living here. And coming back to the example I gave you before, the complete right of the person drowning in the sea to climb upon a piece of wood that is, on this sea in order to save his life, well, this right does not include the right to throw away to the sea someone who is already on this piece of wood. And that is what is the debate about. I am totally for the right of the Jews to climb on this piece of wood called Palestine or the land of Israel. But I totally object the idea that climbing on this piece of wood should involve drawing or pushing the Palestinians away. I think that on this piece of wood there is enough room for both of us, and I think that the only future for Jews, Israeli Jews and Arab Palestinians, is in living together on this piece of wood.
And that's what you were trying to get across in your discussions with the Israeli students. Were they receptive to your argument, your point of view?
Sometimes yes, sometimes not. It's an ongoing struggle. And, you spoke about the film. After the film, we have many, many discussions with the public all around the country, from, the north to the south, religious people, Jews, Arabs, right-wing, left-wing, progressive, conservatives. And for me, it's a good opportunity to discuss with people politics, the question of peace, the question of social justice, the question of environmental change. And, well, when you discuss with people and you try to respect them, and you try to listen to their arguments, and you try to persuade them, then you find sometimes possibilities for change.
So, as far as you know and can tell us, is there enough of a constituency in the Israeli public that would support, let's say, a two-state solution? Is there still possible hope for that? And is that something you would advocate as well?
Well, actually, if you look upon the opinions of Israeli public opinion, you will see, even in this minute, that the majority of Israeli Jews support a two-state solution. That is a very, very clear picture of the attitudes of Israeli public opinion. But there is a paradox there. While most Israelis support a two-state solution, when going to the elections, they vote for right-wing parties that object to this solution. How come? What is the reason for this paradox? Well, the reason for this paradox is actually very simple. While most Israelis believe, while most Israelis support the idea of two-state solution, they do not believe that it is feasible. They do not believe it is possible because most Israelis believe that the Arabs will not accept a two-state solution. Now, why is it that most Israelis do not believe that the Arabs will accept a two-state solution? Well, the reason for this is mainly because this is what the leader or the leaders of Israeli center-left parties told them. Back in 2000, the then Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who was at the time the leader of Labour Party, went to the United States, met with Arafat, and came back telling Israeli public, I offered Arafat everything, and he was not willing to accept. So, he said to the Israeli public, there is no partner. And most Israelis do believe to this day that there is no Palestinian and Arab partner for a two-state solution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
You obviously, or do you disagree with that?
Yes, I disagree with that. I think that the picture that Ehud Barak painted was wrong. I think he did not offer Arafat everything. Actually, he did not offer him enough. And that was the tragedy. I think that at the time, a two-state solution was feasible, and I think it is feasible to this day. I think that to this day there are partners in the Palestinian leadership, in Abu Mazen and in other Palestinian leaders. But unfortunately, Israeli government is not willing to have a two-state solution. So the place where is no partner to peace at the moment is not the Palestinian leadership, but the Israeli government.
Okay, and you've been in that government as a parliamentarian in the Knesset, in which you've literally introduced and have been able to pass well over 100 bills that have dramatically affected the country. So you, in this polarized environment, seem to be able to work within the government to get things done. And in the clip there, in one of the clips of the movie, you're very excited at the beginning of your venture as a politician at the Knesset. But at this point, right, you've left the Knesset, and you're attempting to what? Build a movement from the bottom up. So have you given up on the political, parliamentary, procedural way of trying to bring about change?
Not really. I think that the Knesset is a very, very important arena. As you said, I was able to pass many, many important pieces of legislation on many issues. And I'm very proud about this work. I think that the Knesset is a very, very extremely important arena. However, I think that the Knesset itself is not enough to create the big change we need in Israel. While my legislation really helped many people, it did not change the fundamental course of Israeli polity. And I do believe that such a change is really, really needed. Now, how can we achieve it? Should we have one or two or three more gifted and fighting members of Knesset? Well, this is important. But I think that the main thing we lack is actually a political movement that will support, that will be the power behind those MPs that we will have in the Knesset. I think we should really reinvent Israeli progressive arena and build it from below. And that is actually what I am trying to do myself, I think. Well, because if I think this is the most important thing, to build our movement from scratch, from below, as a joint Jewish-Arab progressive movement with socialist values. If that is the most important thing, then I wouldn't like to say, well, this is the most important thing, so please, mister, let you do it. If this is really the most important thing, I should be part of it myself, and that is what I try to contribute to.
I get it. It's partly what this show is all about as well. Tell us, before we go back to what you've just been talking about, tell us a few of the legislative accomplishments that you had. Give us an idea of what you've been involved in and how you think it's obviously positively affected Israeli society.
How much time do you have?
Well, gosh, I'm looking. Well, take a few minutes.
Okay, let me give you few examples.
Please.
On feminist arena, I passed the legislation extending the maternity leave we have in Israel from 12 weeks to 15 weeks. On human rights issues, I passed the law on rights of prisoners in Israeli jails. It's a very, very important piece of legislation, and it deals not only with criminal prisoners, but also with Palestinian prisoners. So it was very, very difficult to pass it through, but it is a very important piece of legislation. On LGBT, I am responsible to the only piece of legislation that we were able to pass through in Israeli parliament in the last 20 years, and that is a law prohibiting all kind of discrimination on the basis of a gender identity or a gender tendency. On environment, I was responsible to many important pieces of legislation, but let me mention the Israeli Clean Air Act. We celebrated recently 10 years to Israeli Clean Air Act, and the government made a research to find out how much money the big companies paid because of this piece of legislation. And the government found out that big businesses in Israel paid more than $10 billion in the 10 years. That is more than $1 billion a year, expenditures on reducing pollution. So they were very, correct from their point of view to oppose this piece of legislation so bitterly. In Israeli terms, $10 billion is a big sum. And, to put the numbers in context, the research that the government made showed that Israeli society gained, because of this piece of legislation, approximately $35 billion. So in preventing early deaths and preventing illness. Of course, preventing deaths and preventing illness is much more than money, but also in terms of money, Israeli society gained much more than what the polluters had to pay for reducing the pollution they made.
Minimum wage, right? Minimum wage, which
minimum wage
enabled,
yes.
250,000 people to rise above the poverty level, right?
Yes.
Right.
And many other pieces of legislation. The list is very long. So I'm really happy with all these achievements. I think they're important. I do hope that there will be people in the Knesset that will continue to fight for these very, very important issues. I do hope. But as I told you, I think that it is important, but it is not enough. And if we want to create a big change in Israeli politics, we should create something additional that we lack at the moment. And this additional thing is a wide movement that will engage thousands of people, Jews and Arabs, and will connect the different struggles existing in our society to a movement of change.
Do you see some parallels with what you've just described here with some of the American politicians, Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie, perhaps?
Well, I followed their work with, great admiration, and with I support them, and I think that they are doing great job in very, very complicated political scene. So I think that we should learn a lot from their experience, and we will try to contribute some of our experience to this, you know.
Because you are an internationalist, right? I mean, you are obviously an Israeli, but this transcends Israeli society. All your concerns, extending
Surely.
democracy and
Surely.
economic and political justice, obviously. So, are there American organizations, groups, movements that you particularly identify with, or interested in developing alliances with, as you build the movement in Israel?
I do identify with this progressive wing of the Democratic Party.
Okay.
I think that their campaigns and their vision is very, very interesting and important. I follow with great enthusiasm the Green New Deal ideas put forward by AOC and by Bernie Sanders, and in a different version also by Elizabeth Warren. I think that these ideas are trying to meet this huge challenge of climate crisis. This is a main concern for me too. And we are trying to create our own version of a Green New Deal for Israel, because I think that this fight is a global fight, and we should, every one of us should fight for it in his own place and in his own society, and try to create a change.
Agreed. It does seem, though, at the moment. Now, you're having an election early March, correct? In Israel?
Surely.
Surely.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're, as you know, we're still got a ways to go on our campaign, but we're having our struggles and debates here, as you know, in this country. Tell us a little of what your thoughts are concerning Israeli politicians and where the election might be heading. You seem to be having similar struggles, perhaps, as we are, in terms of progressive versus more hardline right perspectives and so on.
Well, in a way, there is interesting similarity, you know, because as in the United States, also in Israel, the right-wing politicians base themselves not only on the super rich. They base themselves on a resentment created in a big part of the popular classes against the establishment. So in a way, Trump is paradoxically an anti-establishment candidate, as Netanyahu is. You know, Netanyahu, who is a son like Trump, of a rich family, is not, you know, he was not really connected with poor people, but he portrays himself as the anti-establishment courageous fighter. So in Israel, he is supported by a big part of the popular classes in our society, and that is a paradox, and that is a challenge we have to meet if we want progressive politics to succeed.
Let me also ask you, Dov, in the clip where you're addressing the Poets Association in Israel, you make a poignant plea in understanding a particular poem and attempting to get the poets, the writers in the audience, to begin to echo to the suffering that is existing in so many parts of Israeli society. And in particular, you were talking about a particular police action in which certain groups of people were taken from their homes, evicted from their homes in northern Tel Aviv. You want to comment on that and perhaps touch on how you were seeking to connect with your audience at a, what I would call a revolutionary, radical love perspective. How do you reach people and get them to feel the pain that so many people are experiencing as a result of policies?
Well, this was very, very interesting event. It was a birthday event or a commemoration event for our national poet Bialik, and I was invited to speak there. This occasion was not only occasion of poets. There were poets in the audience, but there was also a presence of the highest leaders of both the state and the city. The president of the state was there, President Rivlin, and actually the mayor of Tel Aviv, Ron Huldai, was also there. And when I saw him, I decided to concentrate on the evil activity of the municipality of Tel Aviv that happened that very week against those poor people in Givat Amal, this neighborhood in Tel Aviv that were forcefully evacuated from their homes in order to create, big, new, high buildings for rich people. So in a way, this was a direct protest against the mayor of Tel Aviv, who was actually, before me, right in front of me in the audience. And
right, you ran for mayor of Tel Aviv.
Yes, I ran for mayorship in Tel Aviv back in 2008. I was not elected.
Mm-hmm.
I got 34% of the vote, which is very, very good for someone who is coming from the radical left in Israel.
Absolutely.
We ran a campaign with no money at all, so it was a really interesting challenge. But we had many, many enthusiastic volunteers all around the city fighting for us. And actually, although we lost the elections, I got a big majority among young voters. And in a way, this campaign of City for All, this was the name of the movement that I was its candidate to mayorship. This campaign of City for All was in a way a prelude to the very big social protest movement we had in 2011. Because the main ideas and the main concerns that we put forward in the campaign of City for All were then manifested in the social protest movement, the huge social protest movement we had in 2011. And many, many people who were active in City for All in 2008 became 3 years later main leaders of this social protest movement.
So this is the sort of movement that you're developing and have been working with in the past and hope to continue. Is that correct?
Well, it's a different form because City for All was a municipal movement. It was a movement inside the city of Tel Aviv-Yafo,
right,
which is very, very important in Israel, but it is not all over Israel. It's the most important city to my mind, but it's not all over Israel. And now I'm engaged in a movement which is all around the country. You can see our Facebook page also in English, Standing Together. Standing Together is a movement of Jews and Arabs striving and struggling together to have a better society here in Israel, for social justice, for peace, for environmental change. It is a movement that is very, very much spread all over the country, from the north side to the south side. A democratic movement. Activists themselves meet and decide on the agenda and the way of struggle on different issues. So I urge your viewers to watch us in Facebook, in the net, under the name of Standing Together.
Standing Together. We will definitely look for that. And we're going to try to get this to Bernie as well, the tape and more information about what you're doing, because it's a natural. You guys need to meet. Tell us about, ironically, another clip in the part of the movie, documentary, involved you protecting the rights of some Arab residents of the village in the south. Tell us a little about that. What was happening there?
Well, this is a very, very sad story. You know, this very small Arab Bedouin village called El Khiran. Actually, this is a village of Bedouins that were deported from a different place in the beginning of the 50s of last century. And the government at the time took their land and moved them to this particular place where they built their own village called El Khiran. Now, the government comes and say, well, now we need this land, and therefore we will deport you. Why do you need this land? In order to build a new settlement, to build a new village. So the Bedouins say, well, if you want to build a new village, please do it, and we will be part of this new village. No, the government says.
Wow.
We will build a new village, but it will be a village only for Jews. So you do not have any place in this village where you lived for so many years and actually brought there by the government. So I think this is a severe case of injustice. You deport people from their home, you destroy their village in order to build in that very same place a new village for different people because these people are Jews. I think that this is horrible, actually. Therefore, I supported this struggle and I went there to support them. Actually, the government reacted with a lot of force, and they sent the police with arms and ammunition. And the tragedy happened that they killed one of the Bedouin people there. And this was a big tragedy. And when they killed him, they also said he was an activist of Daesh. You know, Daesh is ISIS, the fundamentalist religious group that, is very, very, horrible and dangerous.
Right. Yeah.
Actually, the man that was killed was a brilliant teacher of mathematics in high school, in an Arab school in Israel. As a brilliant teacher, he represented the state of Israel abroad. There was no connection between him and ISIS or any kind of terrorist organization or activity. So they killed a man, and they actually totally lied about the whole thing. Until now, there is no one that paid any price, there is no one that were punished for this,
these are Israeli citizens.
Horrible event. Such a horrible event.
These are Israeli citizens as well, right?
Yes, they are Israeli citizens. That is something that happened inside Israel per se. It's not the occupied territories. These are Arab Bedouin that are citizens of Israel.
Dov, you tell me, you know more about this than I do. The prophetic tradition in the Hebrew scriptures, what's the most important adage that we should be taking from that? Be kind to the stranger.
Surely.
Why don't we
do not do to other what you hate yourself?
So why doesn't that resonate?
This is the most basic idea of Judaism.
The most basic, and yet it doesn't resonate. You were trying to get that across in that talk that you were giving at the Poets Association there. Why isn't it resonating in the Holy Land? What is going on? What's the problem there?
Well, as you know, national extremism is a kind of malady. People are sick, and you have to persuade them and give them cure through political discussion and trying to let them look upon things from a different angle. That is the challenge we have in our society.
Right, right. As we do in our society and around the world. So we just, again, we have a couple more minutes. I just can't tell our audience enough. This is a movie that we all need to see. Are you and Barak having plans to come to America and maybe travel around with the documentary here at some point? Because it needs to be seen here too.
Yes, well, I think Barak has a plan to come with the film to the United States, perhaps in June, May or June, or both. I think it's a very, very good idea. I think that this is a very interesting movie, not because it's a film about me, but actually it is a film about Israel, about the complexity of our society. And I think that Barak is really a brilliant director, so I think it's really a very interesting movie. As for myself, I'm so busy with building this movement from below that I'm not really optimistic about my own possibility to come to the United States. I have many things to do here, back home.
No, come on, you can take a week or two off. We'll.
A wait is 7 days.
7 days. Okay, 5 or 6 days.
24 hours. You know what happens in Israel in 24 hours?
We understand, but
in a very dynamic society.
Well,
every minute here is very important. Every minute counts.
All right. Well, every minute counts here in New York, and we're so grateful that we've had this opportunity to spend with you here. And it's again, the movement that you're developing is called again?
Standing Together.
Standing Together. Actually, it's similar in a sense to the Poor People's Campaign. Moving forward, not one step back. So Standing Together, we will look for it in the website there. Thank you so very, very much,
Thank
Dov,
you for
being on the show. And we're going to go out, I think, on one of your favorite songs as well. John and Yoko Ono, John Lennon, Imagine.
Thank you.
Thank you again. All the best. Shalom. And thank you so very, very much for watching The Radical Imagination this week. This is Jim Vrettos, your host. Thank you again for watching, and Dov Khenin.